The Windone E2 isn't the fastest or the most premium e-bike I've tested, but to my surprise, it has quickly become my favorite. It somehow manages to pack a ton of great features into a budget-friendly package, making me question how it's even possible at this price point. Let's start with the design. You won't mistake it for a high-end e-bike with sleek carbon fiber or futuristic curves. Instead, it embraces a dark, gritty, industrial aesthetic that feels raw and utilitarian. The frame is nothing more than a few simple metal tubes welded together and finished in matte black. But that's exactly what keeps the cost low without compromising function. This no-frills approach allows Windone to focus on performance and practicality rather than over-the-top details, and honestly, I kind of love it for that. The Windone E2 definitely looks like it took design cues from electric dirt bikes and e-motos. With its aggressive rear seat and rugged chassis design, from certain angles you could easily mistake it for a lightweight electric dirt bike, which only goes to show how well the Windone team nailed the high-level aesthetics. And that's checkmark number 1 for me, because let's be real, I don't want to ride an e-bike that looks like it belongs to my grandma. I want something that makes me do a double take every time I walk past it and keeps me itching to take it for another ride. The E2 absolutely delivers on that front, with a design that feels bold, aggressive, and built for fun. It's not just another generic budget e-bike, it's a machine that actually makes you excited to ride. Most off-road electric bikes under $2,000 still use a standard bicycle chassis, which means that even if they claim to be off-road capable, they lack the suspension to make rough terrain comfortable. Typically, you don't start seeing rear shocks until you get into the mid-$2,000 range, so imagine my excitement when I saw a rear shock on this $900 e-bike. Now, to be fair, the shock itself isn't some high-end, fully adjustable suspension system. It only supports adjustable preload and lacks finer tuning options. But here's the thing, it works. And for something in this price range, that's a huge deal. The added rear suspension immediately improves comfort, making bumpy trails and uneven terrain far more manageable than a standard e-bike. And the best part, if you ever feel like upgrading, you can swap it out for a better shock down the road, making the E2 not just a budget beast, but a platform for future customization. The rear shock and front suspension on the Windone E2 completely transformed the riding experience, making it an absolute blast off-road and a dream to cruise with on paved streets. When it comes to comfort, I honestly think the E2 knocked it out of the park. The rear shock features a 205mm center distance and a 1,200 pound capacity, with adjustable preload that allows for some fine-tuning to adjust the ride feel. All of this translates into an ultra-smooth, ultra-comfortable ride, absorbing bumps and rough terrain far better than any e-bike in its class. The suspension does have trade-offs. The rear suspension at times feels too plush for aggressive street riding, especially when turning or carving hard. I can feel the rear shock bouncing around a little too much to my liking. But again, it's completely adjustable. You can change the shocks to better fit each different type of ride. Without exaggeration, the E2 is the most comfortable non-downhill e-bike I've ever tested. Most e-bikes under $2,500 only come with front suspension, leaving the rear completely rigid. But the E2 changes everything by adding rear suspension at a budget price, bringing a level of comfort that's almost unheard of for anything under $1,000. It may not be the most powerful or expensive e-bike I've tested, but what it lacks in raw power, it more than makes up for in ride quality. Whether you're hitting the trails or just commuting on rough city streets, the E2 stands out as one of the smoothest, most enjoyable budget e-bikes on the market. The grass field near my house is extremely uneven, and riding a standard e-bike there has always been a rough and unpleasant experience. On e-bikes without rear suspension, every bump and dip jolts the entire frame, making it feel like the bike is trying to throw me off the pegs or launch me off the seat. Sure, many of those bikes have plenty of power, but without proper suspension, power alone isn't enough to make the ride enjoyable. Now, enter the Windone E2 with its plush rear shock and front dual suspension, and suddenly, this once unrideable field becomes not only manageable, but actually fun. Instead of feeling every jarring impact, the suspension system absorbs the rough terrain, keeping the ride smooth, stable, and controlled. It's the kind of upgrade that completely changes the riding experience, proving that comfort and handling are just as important as raw power when it comes to off-road performance. The Windone E2 has a top speed of 28 miles per hour with pedal assist and 20 miles per hour using motor power alone. And let me tell you, this bike hauls ass, but only if you put in some legwork. With pedal assist, the E2 can quickly climb to 28 miles per hour, but it definitely requires effort from the rider. From my experience, I'd say you need to contribute at least 50% of your strength to maintain that top speed, which makes it feel more like a true hybrid between manual pedaling and the electric assistance, rather than a bike that does all the work for you. My only gripe with the E2's motor is that it's a 500 watt motor with a peak output of 750 watts. While that's fine for flat ground, it's not the most powerful setup when it comes to off-roading or climbing steep hills. If you're riding on trails or trying to push higher speeds off-road, you'll need to pedal to help the bike keep up. On throttle alone, it maxes out at 20 miles per hour, which is still decent for casual riding, but when it comes to tackling serious inclines, the E2 relies heavily on the rider's leg power. For steep hills, you'll need to gear down and put in some serious effort to keep momentum. That being said, for a budget e-bike, the E2 still holds its own, especially on flatter terrain or light off-road conditions. It's not a powerhouse hill climber, but with the right mix of pedal assist and smart gearing, it still gets the job done. The Windone E2 comes with a generous 48-volt, 13 amp hour battery, which is impressive for a budget e-bike. In terms of range, if you're using pedal assist and putting in most of the effort yourself, you could stretch it up to 46 miles. However, if you let the motor do 100% of the work, expect a real-world range of around 15 miles, which is a pretty big drop, but fully expected for a 13 amp hour battery. Of course, the actual range varies depending on riding style. I weigh 190 pounds and tend to ride aggressively, staying in mode 5 most of the time, which naturally drains the battery faster. If you mix up your riding style, alternating between pedal assist, throttle only, and different power modes, your range will land somewhere in between. While it's not the longest range e-bike out there, the E2's battery is solid for its price, giving riders enough juice to handle commutes, off-road adventures, or spirited rides without too much range anxiety. Another thing that really stood out to me on the Windone E2 is the gear system. Normally, I don't pay too much attention to gears. As long as they work, I'm happy, but the Shimano 7-speed system on this bike completely surprised me. It's so quiet and so quick, I actually had to stop riding and check the gears because I thought they hadn't even shifted. The E2's drivetrain delivers one of the smoothest and most seamless gear changes I've experienced on a budget e-bike. There's no harsh clicking, no lag, and no extra noise. Just buttery, smooth, instant shifting that's practically silent. For a budget e-bike, this level of refinement in the shifting system is a huge win. While gears aren't usually a deal breaker for me, the E2's Shimano setup is so good, it actually adds to the overall riding experience. Waterproofing on the Windone E2 could definitely be better. The battery itself is rated IPX5, which means it can handle low-pressure water jets, but the rest of the bike is only rated IPX4, meaning it's just splash resistant. And let's be real, when you're out riding, your bike's water resistance is only as good as its weakest link, and in this case, that's the entire bike only at IPX4. I don't know about you, but I typically ride with the battery attached, so even though the battery has better protection, it doesn't mean much if the rest of the bike is more vulnerable to water exposure. Light rain and small puddles? Fine. Heavy rain or deep water crossings? Hard pass. If it's pouring outside, I definitely wouldn't want to put this bike to the test. While it can handle a little water, it's best to avoid riding in bad weather or at least take precautions to protect the electronics from excessive moisture. The Windone E2 is an absolute standout in the budget e-bike category, delivering a comfortable, fun, and capable ride that punches far above its price point. With its aggressive moto-inspired design, plush front and rear suspension, and whisper-quiet Shimano 7-speed drivetrain, it offers a smooth and enjoyable ride both on and off the road. While its 500-watt motor provides solid performance on flat terrain, steeper hills require some pedal assistance to maintain speed. The 13 amp hour battery delivers anywhere from 15 to 46 miles, depending on how aggressively you ride, and while its IPX4 water resistance is a weak point, the bike still excels in value, comfort, and everyday usability. For under $1,000, it's hard to find an e-bike that checks this many boxes, making the E2 one of the best budget-friendly e-bikes I've tested so far. If you enjoyed this review, be sure to like and subscribe for more e-bike and EV content, and I'll catch you in the next one.